It's been said that expectation is a story that we tell ourselves about the future. Reality is the teacher that edits that story. And right now, some of you are probably thinking, yeah, I've been there. I've been there. Truth is, we've all been there. All of us have imagined or hoped that something would happen only to have reality disappoint us. For example, no one enters a marriage thinking that one day they're going to be divorced. No one begins a new job thinking one day they might get fired or laid off. No one enters a ball game, whether a fan or a player, thinking that they're going to lose. And there's not a man on the planet who goes shopping with his wife and wonders if she'll actually buy anything, because she's buying something. Why is it this way? Why do we have so many expectations? Well, we're wired that way. We're wired that way. We have expectations just about everything, almost everything. My team always wins. The drive-through always gets my order right. The mower starts every time I want to cut grass. Every night I get a good night's sleep. Except my team doesn't always win. And sometimes the drive-through messes up my order. And I've had my share of mower problems. Just ask Bob and Walter. They'll tell you. And I haven't had a great night's sleep in years, if I'm being honest. Expectations don't always meet reality. That's just how life is. Let me give you another example. This past Monday, as I said earlier, I decided to get out and work in the yard, and I did so all day. But before I did so, I decided that we were going to have some wings and some green beans for dinner, and so I put the beans in a pot, and I put the wings in a crock pot, and got everything squared away. Put all the sauces, all the spices, everything in there with the wings. Went outside, worked all day. Came in about middle of the afternoon, went to check on the wings, and it didn't look much different than when I put them in there. Because I forgot to plug in the crock pot. My wife's expectation was we were going to have some wonderful wings and some green beans and sit down and just have a nice dinner and watch TV together. Didn't work out that way. So Owen's Market to the rescue. I had to go get some fried chicken to go with I did cook the green beans. But we have expectations, and then there's reality. Now, it's not that expectations are inherently bad. They're not. They can be a good thing if they motivate you to reach a goal or to achieve something in your life. However, if it's born out of selfishness or it's unrealistic, then what happens is your expectations lead to disappointment and frustration and maybe even anger. Did you know the same could be said for Jesus? There are some people today who fail to welcome the real Jesus into their lives. And instead, what they do is they welcome a version of Jesus into their lives. Their own version of Jesus. And that's what Palm Sunday is all about. Expectation and reality. And as Jesus made his way into Jerusalem, the Jewish people, had an expectation of what he would do when he got there. Jesus had spent 3 years preaching and teaching and healing, and now he enters Jerusalem to live out the final week of his earthly life. He was and is the Messiah. He was the one that they were waiting for. As far as the Jewish people were concerned, Jesus was coming to lead a revolt against Rome. He had been a spiritual leader for 3 years, but now he's going to be a political leader. And he was going to restore Israel's independence. He was the one who would overthrow Roman rule and restore Israel's sovereignty and establish a kingdom of peace. Those were the expectations. That's what the people were expecting Jesus to do. That's who they were expecting him to be. But that's not at all what they got, is it? That wasn't reality. Think about this. In a period of 8 days, Jesus entered Jerusalem for what we refer to as Holy Week. He served as the grand marshal of sorts of what felt like a parade. He cleansed the temple. He gave the Olivet Discourse. He instituted the Lord's Supper. He got arrested, was tried, crucified, and then risen from the dead. That's a busy week. That's a really productive week that Jesus had. He got a lot done that week, didn't he? But much to the dismay of the Jews, it wasn't what they expected. It was reality, but they would have much preferred to have the fulfillment of what they desired, of what they wanted Jesus to do, of who they wanted him to be. And then what happens is we see this stunning betrayal where people who one day are cheering and waving palm branches and chanting Hosanna, excited to receive and celebrate the Messiah. And then the next thing you know, they're chanting, crucify him. And as we get into the text this morning, I want you to consider this question. Have you truly embraced the real Jesus in your life? Have you embraced the Jesus of the Bible in your life? The one that we see revealed in the Scriptures. Or have you welcomed a version of Jesus, one that you're comfortable with, one of your own making? I want to pick up here, chapter 21, verse 1. It says, "Now when they drew near Jerusalem, and they came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, 'Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Loose them, bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, the Lord has need of them, and immediately he will send them.' All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, 'Tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey.'" You know, one of the things that I really love about this passage is the fact that Jesus is asserting himself here as he enters Jerusalem. And why not? He's the Messiah. He's the one who's going to save the people from their sins. And yet he knows what awaits him as he goes. He knows that the Jewish people are going to turn against him. He knows that the religious leaders are going to take him to task. So he knows that he's going to be arrested. He knows that he's going to be scourged. He knows that he's going to be delivered to the Romans to be crucified. But he goes anyway. He goes to Jerusalem anyway. And he doesn't exactly sneak in under the cloak of darkness. He comes in probably the most public and dramatic way possible. And he tells 2 of his disciples to go into a village nearby, and he tells them where they can find a donkey and a colt. And he says, "Bring them to me." Now, I don't know what those 2 disciples were expecting when they went, but I would like to think that they had this attitude of, listen, if Jesus tells me something, I'm going to take him at his word. And if he tells me that those two animals are going to be there at the exact spot in which he tells us, then I'm going to believe it. Because the reality is this: the donkey and the colt were divinely ordained to be exactly where Jesus said they would be, and the disciples would find them in that spot. But even more than that, Jesus was fulfilling prophecy. I want you to hold your place where you are. I want you to turn to near the back of your Old Testament, Zechariah 9, verse 9. I think it's important that we read this together and I just not tell you what it says. Zechariah 9, verse 9. Look at the prophecy spoken here. Remember, this is about 500 years prior to the events of Matthew 21. Okay? Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. Your king is coming. 500 years prior to the events of Matthew 21. We see prophecy here in Zechariah. And guess what? Jesus is that king. And he's a righteous king. And he's a holy king. And he's a king unlike any other king that we've ever seen. Regardless of expectations, King Jesus would be a victorious king when it was all said and done. Now go back to Matthew. I want you to notice that Jesus came in all humility. He came with dignity. He didn't come as a conquering general. He came as a suffering servant. He didn't come for political reasons. He came for spiritual reasons. And the Jewish people weren't smart enough to know which one they needed the most. And we're living in a society today where the same could be said for a lot of other people. Many people today are dying and going to hell, but all they care about is getting ahead. All they care about is making money. All they care about is buying new things and embracing all that the world has to offer. I don't know what their expectations are when it comes to getting to heaven, but it probably doesn't include embracing the holy, righteous Son of God and living for Him only. I saw a video the other day. How many of you know who Ray Comfort is? Heard of Ray Comfort? He has a ministry called Living Waters Ministry. I saw a video the other day of him, and he does a lot of this. Kirk Cameron used to go out together and witness to people, but Ray Comfort does a lot of this. And he was out at a park somewhere, and he had four young men there, teenagers. They were like 18, 19 years old. And he started talking to them. He was witnessing to them. And all four of them, as Ray Comfort kind of took them through the Ten Commandments, at least four of them, all of them admitted to being lying, thieving, blaspheming fornicators as they were challenged with the Ten Commandments. All of them. They didn't know Christ. And then Ray says, "Do you think you'll go to heaven?" And he went down the line to each one, all four of them. And every single one of them said, yes, yes, yes. yes. Keep in mind, they had just admitted to being lying, thieving, blaspheming fornicators. Yet they still think they're going to heaven. Folks, listen, that's an expectation. That is not reality. Because no one wants to admit that they're deserving of hell. Nobody does. And so the only other answer is, I'm going to heaven. Truth of the matter is, expectations have sent a lot of people to hell and separated them from God for all of eternity. Expectations, reality. What the Jewish people wanted was not what they needed the very most. But Jesus came anyway, didn't he? To save them from their sins. I want you to pick up in verse 6. So the disciples went and did as Jesus commanded them, and they brought the donkey and the colt, and they laid their clothes on them and set him on them. And a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Then the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest! And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, Who is this? So the multitude said, This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. So the disciples did what Jesus told them to do. They go and they get the animals. Jesus told them where they were. They go, they find them, they bring them back. They make their way into Jerusalem, and the Jewish people are there. They are there to greet Jesus. It was Passover, and here comes King Jesus, and the people were so excited that they laid their clothes on the road, which was a form of recognition and loyalty. And they waved palm branches and laid those on the road, which was emblematic of victory and success. And they're chanting, Hosanna, Hosanna, which means save now. Imagine this scene. I mean, it was epic. There was no rebellion. There was no contempt. There was no drawn swords. It was a parade-like atmosphere. The people were there to worship the Messiah. And they're crying out for deliverance. So the city was alive with excitement and praise. But what the Jewish people expected was not at all what they got. And when you read Luke's account of this story, he shares something that's very, very important. He writes, Now as Jesus drew near, he saw the city and he wept over it. Imagine that. In the midst of all of this excitement, in the midst of this worship experience, Jesus weeps. Why? Because he knew what was coming. He knew that in just a few days, all of these cheers would turn to jeers by these very same people. And I think it's really important for us to consider that kind of heart change, because it's drastic. Folks, listen, we're not always going to get what we want. We're not always going to get what we expect. We're not always going to understand why God allows certain things into our lives. And there will be times when we don't understand what God is doing. And our expectations don't meet reality. And listen, you can either trust Him and praise Him anyway, or you can become bitter and angry and even take God to task if you choose. And that's what the Jewish people did. When they realized that Jesus didn't come to save them from the Romans, He didn't come to overthrow the government. He came for something so much more important than that. And yet the Jews turned on Him quicker than a politician on election night. And it didn't take very long. Now, I want you to turn over to Matthew 27. I want you to pick up in verse 11. You know the story. The chief priests plot against Jesus because He claimed to be the Messiah. Pick up here verse 11. Now Jesus stood before the governor. And the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accursed by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered him not one word. So the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast of the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, "Have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests, the elders, persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" They said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "What shall I do with Jesus who's called Christ?" They all said to him, "Let him be crucified." And the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." And when Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and he washed his hands before the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it." And all the people answered and said, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them. And when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And when we consider the story, we recognize the fact that Judas does his part in betraying Jesus. And the Jewish people, just days from when they were worshiping Jesus and cheering Jesus, now they're just simply piling on. Jesus is brought before Pilate, the governor at the time. The religious leaders expected a favorable ruling, and they got it. A guilty verdict. But Pilate wanted to let Jesus go because he found no legal basis to hold him, much less crucify him. And then his wife's disturbing dream about Jesus and her warning him about harming Jesus, that didn't help matters any. But the Jews wanted him dead. Even when placed side by side with this noted criminal, Barabbas, the Jews chose to free him over Jesus. And so, Pilate delivers Jesus to be scourged, to be whipped, literally pulling flesh from his body, and then they crucified him. And what was it that the Jewish people and the religious leaders expected? Well, they expected that Jesus would die and he would never be heard from again. That was the expectation. That was not reality. And we'll talk more about that next week because the tomb is empty. Amen? But how does all of that apply to us? This whole idea of expectation versus reality. Well, let me first say this. If you're going to embrace Jesus, make sure that you embrace the Jesus of the Bible and not your own watered down version of Jesus. And then there are three areas of concern that we need to consider when we talk about expectations and reality. And I'll go through them quickly. Number one is life experiences. Some believers think that they deserve to have an easy life, a mostly trouble-free life. But Jesus himself said, listen, you're going to have trials and tribulations. Your faith is going to be tested. You will need to persevere all the way to the end. But in him, we find peace and we find comfort. Number two, relationships. The expectation is that all of our relationships will be wonderful. Family, church family, extended family, friends, whatever it is. That it'll all be free of conflict. After all, we're Christians. We're also imperfect people. And we're sinful people. And sometimes the people that are closest to us hurt us the most. That's why we must practice not only forgiveness, but patience. Number three, answered prayer. Answered prayer. Our expectation is that God will answer our request the way we presented it. He'll answer it when we want and how we want. But God has His own timetable. It's His will, not ours, that is most important. So we must trust Him and exercise our faith knowing that God is for us. Earlier I said that reality is a teacher who edits the story. I want to encourage you this morning to allow God to edit your story. Whatever plans you have, whatever desires you have, hold on to them loosely. Write them down in pencil. Because it's possible that your expectations just might not be big enough for what God actually wants to do in your life. When your expectations of God are different from your reality. It's up to you to respond the right way. The Jewish people responded in anger. They responded in hatred. They wanted him dead. They thought they were going to get one thing. They got something totally different, and they weren't smart enough to figure out that what they actually needed is what Jesus brought: salvation. The response is up to you. You can either trust him or you can get mad at him. You can walk away from him. It always gets me, these people, when you witness to them, they say, "Yeah, I used to be a Christian." It's like, "Yeah, I used to drive a Nova. I don't drive one anymore." You used to be a Christian. "Yeah, and then God did this, and I just walked away. Got mad at God." Isn't it amazing how in life experiences, when things go bad, it's always God's fault? But when things go good, he never gets the credit. With a lot of people. I know that's not true with our people. But that's what you experience out there in the world. Expectations, reality. You want the reality that God is going to provide for you, because that's his will. Will you bow your heads with me?